Back, WNST around the NFL as free agency and tampering and all that stuff begins, and we inch even closer to opening day, which it's going to throw off like daylight savings. Luke, over the weekend threw me off. Opening day on a Thursday afternoon is going to be very, very weird coming up here in 2 weeks, but we are 2 weeks out on opening day all of a sudden, and pitching's got to get it together, bats got to get it together, and here we go with the Orioles coming north soon.
Yeah, a Thursday afternoon in late March opening day. It's definitely a little strange, but it's right around the corner, and that's what's both exciting if you're just a baseball fan in general, and I think very unsettling if you're an Orioles fan looking at the state of this roster and looking at the prospects for 2018. We've talked about it quite a bit over the weekend. Two of the big three starting pitchers that remained on the free agent market, being Lance Lynn and Jake Arrieta, finally came off the board. Now, I don't think anyone at all expected a Jake Arrieta reunion. I think even if the Orioles were willing to pony up 3 years, $75 million, I don't think there was a fit there. But Lance Lynn going to the Twins, 1 year, $12 million, and even some reports out there that the Orioles had been testing the waters there, might have even offered a multi-year deal. I'm guessing it was a deal along the lines of an Andrew Kashner kind of deal with some deferred money, whatever the case.
How would you have felt about that? If Lance Lynn, if they gave him $12.5 million and bring him in here and say, take the ball 32 times, I don't know that it makes him a contender, but I take him a whole lot more seriously than I do today when Lance Lynn is not an Oriole. Let's put it to you that way.
Oh, no question about it. And even if you are more skeptical about their chances, and I would still be very skeptical, even I think I said to you at the start of the offseason, even if they had signed Lance Lynn and Alex Cobb, I'm still not sure it's enough to seriously contend in the American League East, and still would be looking at more of that wild card picture. But yeah, it would have made things far more interesting. And even if you don't contend, and even if you do disappoint, and players don't play up to expectations, and you're out of it in late July, and we're talking about Machado and Britton and Brock and maybe even Adam Jones, if Lance Lynn's on a one-year deal, you can deal him and probably get a decent piece or two back. So I think from that standpoint, it would have made a lot of sense. I think it's very clear, and I know you've talked about this a lot, but if you're talking about a one-year deal in Baltimore, hitter, fine. Yeah, that's great. And Nelson Cruz is the immediate example that comes to mind here recently. But a one-year deal, if you're looking to give yourself a pillow contract, looking to reboost your value and see if next year's free agent market is any more appealing, you're probably not going to pitch for the Orioles in the American League East. So in that case, if they were to have gotten Lance Lynn, I'm guessing they would have had to have given him more than 1 year, and probably would have had to give some good money. I don't know if it would have had to have been $15 million a year or whatever it would have been, but that 1 year, $12 million contract that. This
isn't a place you want to come and pitch to get your next deal. There's no doubt about that. Sure.
Right. I mean, and that's not to say that I don't think that's the case of pitchers won't come here, but you're not going to be able to sell Baltimore as the place that you're going to reestablish your value.
Down on the bayou, they call that the lanyap. That 13th donut that you have to have. Yeah. The Orioles would have to have some lanyap thrown into that deal. They're really in a precarious situation when it comes to winning. They really have to be so much better than everyone else, the way Andy McPhail was for about 24 months, where he made great decisions in draft picks, and they have kind of eaten off of that by and large for a little while, and now all of a sudden they need to, much like the Ravens with the 16th pick, they need to make their own fantastic decisions. And I don't know that, Kashner's that decision. I don't know that Mark Trumbo was that decision, or Chris Davis, and I know you've been writing about that a lot, but, it feels as though, I don't want to say tanking, but it feels like, we're going to go with what we got. $12 million that is going to get us 30 more credible starts this year. Why do we need that? I mean, it's not like you're asking him to spend Jake Arrieta money, but at $12 million, when you see a guy that's traditionally had a low 3 ERA and, good innings, a good whip, things that you want, a professional pitcher, a number 3 kind of starter on a good team. why not give that guy $15 million? I mean, they've done it with the Kevin Millwoods of the world over the years.
Yeah, and it's a very fair question, and it really does go back to what is the direction of this team. They're not tanking. I mean, if they were tanking, they would have traded off all these guys.
Which makes it even worse, because I don't know what the hell they're doing.
Well, and that's the problem. I've said this over and over. Pick a direction. As I've said, going back to December when we were talking about Manny Machado, I think if I were truly the GM, or more importantly, if I were the owner, with the team being in the position that it's in now, and if you make a decision that you don't feel Manny Machado is the right guy to invest a $300 million contract in, and you and I have talked about that over the last couple of years. I mean, I think that's a fair conclusion to come to. I'm not saying it's the right one per se, but I think that's at least fair to say that. But my point is, I would be in much more of a frame of mind of trying to build the next winning period of time for the Orioles, then opening up the next window. Instead, they're kind of in this pattern where, okay, they still have talented players. I don't think they're going to lose 100 games. I don't think they're that god-awful by any stretch. But at the same time, I'm really hard-pressed to look at this team and come up with a scenario where they win 88 games and maybe they steal the second wild card.
You know what's fascinating? I think that there's a lot more possibility of them losing 100 than winning 100, that's for sure. And that really would mean that Adam Jones gets old or hurt. That would mean that Machado's kind of in the tank. That Scope isn't where he was last year, and Trumbo and Davis fall apart. I could envision a scenario where Bundy has a stiff arm in May, and all of a sudden all their dreams and hopes where they could easily lose 100 games this year. I don't think I have to be dour to think that is a possibility. I can't imagine any scenario where they could win 92. I mean, so many things would have to go so right. I find that hard to believe that Trumbo and Davis and these guys are going to bounce back. That's my feeling on it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, but you probably would have said the same thing in 2012 when they won 93 games. So, I mean, you never really know. I think what the point you just made. I mean, you can really say that about just about any team, though. I mean, look at the San Francisco Giants last year. They ended up losing what? I think they lost 98 games. No one thought that would happen. So, I mean, you can always have, Madison Bumgarner got hurt. So you can always have those worst-case scenarios. But your point's well taken from the standpoint of it's really difficult envisioning this team being in a position where they can win 90-plus games, because I just think too many things have to go right, and I don't think there are enough of those things that can go right from a pitching standpoint. Okay, sure. You could sell me on the idea that Dylan Bundy and Kevin Gausman both blossom into 16-game-plus winners. Okay, I could buy that. Still, what's happening with the rest of that rotation? What's happening with Chris Tillman? What's happening with the number 5 spot that is either Miguel Castro or Mike Wright or Nestor Cortez or who knows right now? I just think there are certainly things that could go well for this team, and beyond the pitching, and this is what I wrote at WNST.net, you look at Chris Davis and Mark Trumbo right now, both being sidelined, neither considered to be a serious long-term thing, at least as far as we know. But this team, it just really illustrates how much they need some guys to bounce back and play much better. I mean, they need those two guys to be better than replacement-level players, which is what they were last year, which is not a good thing when you're talking about two of your highest-paid players. So there are so many questions, far more questions than answers. I think on the positional side, yeah, there's still plenty of talent there. I still see scenarios where they can certainly be in the wild card race, but is it kind of sort of just mathematically being in the race like they were last year, like they were in 2015, or is it a case where they really have a legitimate chance? And if they were to have added a Lance Lynn, or if they still were to add an Alex Cobb, who's still out there, at least as we begin a new week of business around Major League Baseball, okay, that improves their chances at the very least. I think it makes them more interesting, but do I think that's going to happen? Well, we're a little over 2 weeks out from the start of the season, and even with Arrieta and Lance Lynn finding homes now, are they going to be ready for the start of the season? You have to be really skeptical about that. So that doesn't, by the way, that doesn't mean I'd say that's a reason not to do it, but it just shows that things are getting pretty late in spring training at this point. And for the Orioles, I don't think we've found any answers at this point, just more and more questions. Now, I guess if there's one positive, Andrew Kastner made his first Grapefruit League start on Sunday, a rare game televised on Mass, and looked pretty good. 4 shutout innings, got a lot of ground balls, and that's kind of his formula. If he's going to be successful, he's going to have to induce plenty of those grounders and not have the ball being hit in the air at Camden Yards.
How's the beard going on? Anything you want to throw in on the beard controversy?
For Andrew Kastner?
Yes.
In fact, it was funny. I know an interview over the weekend that he did actually said that the Orioles relaxed the rule a little bit for him, a la Rick Sutcliffe back in 1992. He said that he has to keep it neatly trimmed, but they have relaxed the rule, and he even said that he wouldn't have signed with the Orioles if they were to have made him shave his beard. So I thought that was interesting. But look, I mean, I wasn't real high on the Kastner signing. I still am not, but I think he at the very least can eat innings for them. I think he can keep them in games. I don't think he's going to have a 3.4 ERA again by any stretch of the imagination, but I think
nor are they paying him to have a 3.4
right, exactly,
ERA.
and that's the point to be made there. No one was really buying that 3.4 ERA because they saw the strikeout numbers, they saw the contact rate way up, they saw a very fortunate batting average on balls put in play.
They have analytics.
Yeah, yeah, but he is as much of a regression candidate as you're going to find on the pitching side. But that said, this is also a guy who still throws pretty hard, has relied more on his two-seam fastball, and perhaps relied on that too much and went away from trying to miss bats a little bit more last year. And I think it's still reasonable to think that strikeout rate could come back up. 2 years ago, he struck out more than 7 per 9 innings, which isn't great, but it's solid at least. So, I don't think Andrew Kastner's automatically going to be a disaster. I just don't have great expectations there. And certainly, when you're talking about a team that set a franchise record and a major, last in the majors in starter ERA, Andrew Kastner had to be that can't be your big ticket as saying you're going to fix your rotation. That can't be the only thing you do. And I'm not counting Chris Tillman because he was part of the problem last year. So when he's your one, quote, big ticket item, that that your starting rotation is still in a world of trouble.
All of our WNST programming here brought to you by our friends at Cole Roofing. We all felt that March wind blowing in here a couple weekends ago. A lot of homeowners and commercial owners of large properties have some damage up on the roof, don't even know it. Give my friend Bill Cole and the Cole Roofing family, now 99 years in business. That's almost twice as long as I've been here. Next year it'll be 100 years for them. Find them at coleroofing.com to assess your needs. Also, King Discount Liquors. Give the King a ring. Lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. Pick yourself up some Malbec, some stout like I do. Get to Rosedale over on Pulaski Highway and give the King a ring. Also, Fremont Mortgage sponsoring our live event with Barry Trotz coming up on March 29th. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need the right lender. You need Freedmont.com and Freedmont Mortgage. We're going to hear from Carl Delmont this week here at WNST.net. Luke, I am holding up my Oriole early bird schedule here that begins on the 29th. And it is funny, the whole Lance Lynn thing is part of our conversation. The Orioles are going to have to go beat him the opening weekend now, right? So the Twins just got better the first weekend by having him. That's what throwing $12 million at your pitching St. Patrick's Day week will do for you, right?
No question, and the funny thing about that is you look at the Twins last year, as great of a story as they were, go take a look at what their starter ERA was. It wasn't very good. I believe they were, I want to say, 11th in the American League in starter ERA. Well, what have they done? They added Odorizzi. They've added Lance Lynn. That doesn't mean their rotation's great. You don't put it up there with the best in baseball by any means, but it's much better. They've improved their chances to not just be a team that makes the wild card, but be a team that might be able to really contend with Cleveland in that AL Central. So it's not as though they spent a ton of money to make the moves that they've made, and It's not as though I think all the moves that they made will necessarily pan out, but certainly more aggressive than we have seen the Orioles be this offseason as it relates to their pitching. So it's funny you mentioned that schedule and the early bird schedule. Go take a look at that Orioles schedule. It is not. Baseball did them no favors early in the season.
Well, I can't imagine. I looked at the All-Star game and see that that's in D.C. instead of here, so I know Major League Baseball is doing them no favors. But Minnesota to start, off to Houston. They only are the reigning world champs. Then off to New York for not 3 games but 4. Then Toronto comes in here, and I'm sure that'll be a lovely April 9, 10, and 11 where it'll be 44 degrees at game time at 7 o'clock. Although we did get more sunshine over the weekend, so at least you'll have more daylight. Then off to Boston, and then off to Detroit in the middle of the week. Then Cleveland comes in here. So, the whole notion that this thing starts 3-11 would really, really be ugly, man. And all they can do is hope to be 6-6 and 9-8 or 9-11 or wherever that's going to be by the end of the month, because most nights Vegas is going to have them as an underdog, because most nights they don't have the pitching to be a favorite.
Yeah, and I think that's understandable. And what they place, I think it's 14 of their first 20 on the road, something along those lines. I mean,
that is correct. 14.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge for them. If they can at least tread water early in the season, then okay. You'll come home then for a long home stand, and you hope things stabilize a little bit.
By the way, can I just say this? It's like middle of March. This is the first time I've looked at the schedule. This is the first time you and I have had this conversation about. It is really unbelievable how tough their April sets up, and this is the first that's gotten on my radar as to how bad it is, really.
Yeah, and that's, you never know what a schedule is going to look like. I mean, you never know how the opposing team starting pitchers are going to line up for a given 3 or 4 game set. So you never want to make too much of it, but there's no question that it's going to be tricky. It's going to be very hairy early on in the season. Especially knowing how poor this team was on the road last year, and even over this era of winning over the last 5 to 6 years, they haven't exactly always played great on the road, and that's not terribly unique, even for teams that are in contention. But they definitely are going to have to weather the storm of playing some really tough competition early on. I mean, a bunch of playoff teams, road games. So we're now in that period where, unless Alex Cobb's walking through that door the next couple of days, you kind of look at this roster and say, well, this is what it is. I mean, we don't know exactly who's going to be the 5th starter. We don't know.
Nestor Cortez is going to be the 5th starter. Everyone knows that. Just admit it. Come to it, man. Look, man, Castro's got a beard, which means the old man is checked out, right? And if the old man's checked out, it's time to have a Nestor in the rotation, I think. And I am for Nestor Cortez for 5th starter because I like left-handers from Hialeah.
Well, and I know Dan Duquette has talked about it on a number of occasions for whatever. And
I just want to hear the word Dan Duquette say the word Nestor. I want to.
I've heard him say it. Yeah, I mean, he talked about it at Fan. He talked about him briefly at Fan.
So here's what I need you to do. I need you to get me the tape of that. I'm going to cut that up into a promo. And we're going to have Dan Duquette saying, listen to Nesta. Yeah, that'd be great, man. It'd be good stuff.
But, I mean, it looks, I would say there's a good chance that he's going to be on this roster, at least as the long man out of the bullpen, if not the 5th starter. So
I'm doing my Vince Bagley on the air right now, the left-hander, like going to the bullpen. That's what we need. We need more Nestors on this team.
Yeah, and Duquette has talked about the desire to have a left-handed starter. I'm not really someone that says you need to have a left-hander in the rotation. You need to have 5 good starters. That's what it comes down to. I'll take 5 right-handers. I'll take 5 left-handers. I'll take 5 guys that are ambidextrous.
Or amphibious. I mean, the Angels got one of those guys, apparently, right?
Right. So just be able to get guys out. And as they're constructed right now, I don't feel so great about that. I feel okay about some guys. Dylan Bundy, his first couple starts was not good whatsoever in Grapefruit League, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt as long as he starts turning in some better outings here over the next couple weeks. Kevin Gausman, we know the story with him. At times he looks like he can be a great pitcher. Other times has been terrible. Can he finally put together a complete season? I know he's 27 years old now. The time for him to do that is now, unless he's just going to, this is kind of who he is. He's just going to be an okay pitcher. Cashner, we talked about him. Tillman, who knows? The Orioles have kept him away from the public eye in terms of pitching in Grapefruit League games to this point, although he's going to get some action here soon. But it really is a case of not having a whole lot of faith, having plenty of questions, and these guys have to prove it because I'm not holding my breath that they are going to sign Alex Cobb. And if they do, and we're talking in a couple days, I'll gladly say I was wrong. But Lance Lynn off the board, Jake Arrieta, who was never going to be an option. I mean, we know that. But those guys officially off the board, and Alex Cobb's the last man standing as far as someone that feels like they could move the meter, not as a number one starter, but as someone who could help, as someone who you could pencil into the top half of the rotation. And for now, he's out there, but again, hard to imagine the Orioles are the team that's going to pull the trigger there. And even so, any of these guys that are being signed at this point now in the middle of March have to wonder if they're going to be ready for the start of the season. I'm pretty skeptical of that.
He is Luke at WNST.net, as well as Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to be the best at everything they do. Branches throughout Baltimore and Maryland. The unique hands-on approach to banking for you. They are sponsoring all of our community and charity chats, mainly on Thursday mornings. I'll be telling you more about that. We got a lot of rock and roll coming up. If you missed our John Corabi interview or our Rob Halford or Michael Schenker, you can find all that out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. So we are mixing up our conversations amongst the Orioles and the Ravens and others. All of it also brought to you by our friends at Cole Roofing. We all felt that March wind blowing in. If you got some roof issues up there on your commercial roof, you need my pal Bill Cole and our friends at Cole Roofing. 99 years doing it. Also, Pizza John's. I have my Pizza John's hat around here in my mug. You know what? I have all sorts of props here. Pizza John's for the pizza. Luke, anything you want to say about the pepperoni pizza over at Pizza John's?
The pepperoni and the meat sauce. That's what I go with, and
I don't go with the meat sauce, but
I never steer away from that. I get that every time, and there's plenty of other great food there. I know that. But
dude, I got a cheesesteak 2 Saturdays ago, and
it's good. Yeah.
The woman behind the counter looked at me. She's like, "Are you sure you always get the pizza?" I'm like,
"Exactly.
I'm getting the cheesesteak this time. I might even get the meatball sub next time, But Pizza John's, my mom's favorite, my wife's favorite, Luke's favorite. Back River Deck Road down in Essex. Go and see them. And last but not least, Royal Farms, gassing up using that Rofo app and getting points. That'll hook you up with the Western fries as well as some wings and some chicken breast. And nothing goes better with March Madness than a little box of chicken. Bring it home real fresh, real fast. Also that tasty coffee in the morning, the Kona blend at Royal Farms. All right, Luke, I'm going to go wild card here with you and get off the Oriole train here because you've said the words Jake and Arrieta several times. I know some folks, this goes under radar, miss that he signed with the Philadelphia Phillies. I don't know about this market, and I know the owners have been trying to stick it up Boris's rectum for a long time. I started to see the Boris has underestimated the marketplace, and he's given his clients away here, and what happened to Moustakas over the week. What do you want to say about this now that it's settled out and guys like Arrieta are going to go and agree to pitch for the Philadelphia Phillies?
Well, at the same time, he got $25 million a year. It's really interesting. And look, I'm not going to say there hasn't been some shenanigans. I don't know if it's gone as far as collusion, but I think it's very clear. And we've talked about this CBA. I mean, even before this offseason, in questioning the players' union as far as some of the concessions that they've given, and as far as what's become at least a soft cap, and has almost acted like a hard cap with the luxury tax threshold. But you look at Arrieta, you look at the deal Eric Hosmer ended up getting. I think Mike Moustakas, it's easy to say, well, okay, no one wanted him, but go take a look. Most of the contenders in baseball, most of the teams that are really trying to win, they have third basemen. They're in a position where he wasn't a dramatic upgrade. And take a look at Moustakas. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a nice player. Do I think this guy's a big-time superstar that is worthy of a lucrative deal? Probably not.
Probably no more than Chris Davis or Trumbo at this point, right?
You know what? It's funny that you mentioned that. I can't recall who made, and this might have just been an Orioles fan that I follow on Twitter or just a baseball fan. I don't even know if it was an quote expert. but someone made the point that Mike Moustakas, was kind of like that kind of a player, So I think in that case, when you're in a position that you're a team that's not contending, he's not a guy that's necessarily going to move the meter. Okay, yeah, you could use a third baseman and he'd provide an upgrade, but what's the payoff there? Are you really going to make yourself that much better? I mean, I know, I'm not saying he hasn't had some big years and hasn't been productive, but at the same time, does he profile to really help you and set you up for long-term success? And I think the answer there is no for a lot of teams. It's really more a case of you're just spending a bunch of money just for the sake of spending it. And contenders who really could have used him didn't necessarily need him. So I don't know. I mean, it's, you're talking about a guy who has a career .305 on-base percentage. Yeah, he hits home runs when he's healthy and hit 38 home runs this past year. But I think there are multiple things that have gone on here. Some of it you could say has been some level of collusion, maybe. I think teams are getting smarter in terms of realizing that most of these free agents who are hitting the market at age 29, age 30, are generally not great investments. I think at the same time, you've seen the free agent reliever market. That was the one thing that was healthy this offseason. So I think you're seeing the game
that's
change.
A cheaper market. That's not a $75 million market, right?
But at the same, it's one thing to say it's cheaper, but we know how important relievers and the bullpen has become in this day and age. So I can kind of see different layers to this. Certainly, the next CBA is going to be fascinating. I think the biggest thing the Players Union needs to go after is trying to change the system as far as young players and the number of years of control, maybe trimming it down from 6 to 4 or 3. And maybe that's the way to do it. That way you have more Manny Machado and Bryce Harper types hitting the market, meaning guys in their mid-20s rather than guys in their late 20s or hovering around 30 years old. So you have that. You have, I think, teams are getting smarter in how they try to spend money. But at the same time, we still saw some players who still got some really attractive deals. Yu Darvish, as much as a lot of people talked about that deal, some people praised it, even saying that it was a bargain. I don't know. I think Yu Darvish has always been a guy who his reputation has always been better than what the actual product has been.
He's not the guy you want with the ball in Game 1 or Game 7 of an October series. I think we've seen that much. Arrieta might be, but I find it a fascinating... Look, I know why he took the deal. It's money. It was the best deal in the marketplace for him. And if their promise is we're going to stink now, we'll get rid of Kapler, we're going to bring in Buck Showalter next year, we're going to throw $350 million at Manny, we're serious, I'll hear that from the Philadelphia Phillies. I don't think that there's any point where next year they can't be really good if they get some blossoming in a division where maybe the Nationals go off the other end of the pier next year when they lose Harper or whatever. I mean, I hear that the Phillies are serious. They were always serious in spending money after they won and giving too much money to the Ryan Howards and all the Cole Hamels and all those guys on the other side of that deal.
Yeah, I think Philadelphia is going to be I think they can be interesting this year. I don't think they're going to challenge the Nats. But I
don't think they like being in last place and having a half-empty stadium. I don't think that's acceptable. And certainly at a time when the Eagles are up there winning, from a my team against your team type of thing, they don't want to play second fiddle up there to these teams. And the Sixers are coming on, as you know.
Well, that's true. But I think, they've been in rebuilding mode. I mean, it's not as though this is, for them to do this is completely shocking. I think this.
But rebuild without a lot of promise. I don't know that that anybody looks at the rebuild and says they're going to be the Astros soon because they haven't gone out and made wheat yet, right? Literally.
Well, and last year was kind of the year that I think they expected to be a little bit better. It almost reminds me of where the Orioles were in, say, 2010. If you remember before that year where they specifically got off to that 2-16 start, there was actually some guarded optimism that maybe the Orioles could be a 500 team that year, that maybe they were starting to move in the right direction. And as is the case many times with young teams, including the Astros a couple years ago, mind you, remember, they had the big season in 15, and then they got off to a really lousy start the following year and didn't make it to the playoffs. So with young players, you can always have a plan. You can always have a tentative schedule of how you think things are going to go, and it doesn't always play out that way. It's great to talk about the Astros. It's great to talk about the Cubs, but how many teams can you look at over the years where they had a similar kind of plan and it never really came to fruition? So it's risky. It's not always guaranteed. In the case of the Phillies, they have some good young players, but last year I think they were expecting to be a little bit better than they were. Didn't happen, but they threw money at Jake Arrieta, who is still someone I think who can have some really productive years, even if he has been trending in the wrong direction since 2015, which, by the way, there was only one way to go but down after 2015 for Arrieta. So it'll be interesting, and I'll be totally honest with you, Nestor, that one of the first things I thought of when I first saw that the Phillies had agreed to terms with Arrieta was, I wonder if they would reopen discussions with the Orioles about Manny Machado, who, if you remember back in December, a lot of people were scratching their head, but it sounded as though the Phillies were one of those teams really kicking the tires and inquiring about Machado. Perhaps would they have a little more urgency now to say, hey, if they add Manny Machado, they might be a really serious contender on top of signing Jake Arrieta. So who knows? That's just something that popped in my head more than anything else about the Phillies, but definitely going to be interesting. But I don't know how we're going to look back at this market 5-10 years from now. I don't know if maybe there'll be a smoking gun and there'll be a collusion case. Who knows? But it's definitely been an interesting off season on so many different levels.
Luke at WNST.net finds him. Baltimore Luke finds him on Twitter as well. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day as we get ready for opening day. We're a couple weeks out on that. We are in the tampering NFL free agency period. And obviously, March Madness is rolling on. We got head coach Barry Trotz of the Washington Capitals joining us on the 29th of the month. All of that will be brought to you by our friends at Freedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need the right lender at Freedmont Mortgage. So many things going on around here, doing some rock and roll chats, obviously doing our Be More Positive series on Thursday mornings. That brought to you by Howard Bank and our friends at Cole Roofing. And of course, breaking news always happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Kolatzis will be here on Thursday, driving you home from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. Never a dull moment around here. UMBC playing on Friday night. We got the dogs barking. You can hear head coach Ryan Odom out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault, as well as John Feinstein. We're getting around this week, mixing it up. Some sports, some rock and roll, some baseball, some football, even a little bit of hockey around here. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.